As this adoption of data happened over the last decade, the dirty little secret is the number of people that companies were employing to get value from data was also growing exponentially. Isn't automation and RPA supposed to help with all of that? And we uncovered that essentially traditional RPA showed people the art of the possible, like what you could automate, but they couldn't really because they needed more flexibility than what was possible. So agents have conversations. I think the conversational mode is one of the nice flexible things. You don't have to build everything in a UI with 3 levels of top downs, but it's also a way for us to create unattended pieces of work. First off, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Look, I think that most recently I came out of the big data world. So we were the folks who helped commercialize an open source initiative called Hadoop. You might have heard of that at Hortonworks and then at Cloudera. So I felt that was a very nice way for us to have ringside seats to large companies adopting data in every fabric of what they did. Right. So when people say data as DNA, that happened in the last 10 years. Right. So people used to have tiny little silos of transactional data, and now fast forward now, and they got petabytes, exabytes of data. And that's the sort of customer base exposure area that we came out of. And this along the way there, we kind of saw towards the end of that journey, there was an opportunity to do something that was truly interesting with Gen AI. This was just, ChatGPT had happened. People were trying to figure out how they were going to leverage this in the context of data. And we saw a problem that as this adoption of data happened over the last decade, the dirty little secret is the number of people that companies were employing to get value from data was also growing exponentially.
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense. We're thinking nobody has budget that just because you got more data this year, you got to have more people analyzing the data. So we started digging into it and said, what are all these analysts? They're not all data scientists. What are they all doing with the data? What's going on here? And the unpack was, I think for companies or organizations of any size to get from sort of insights to outcomes, that's not a straight line. Right? That's kind of where there's a lot of human looking across multiple systems, prioritizing, figuring out what's really an outcome that we care about versus what is noise, separating that out. These are all the important, clever things that people do. And then at the end of the day, you got to do something about that insight. And I examined this problem. It's a beautiful problem. And I set it on the shelf. That doesn't make us any money. It is how do you get to actually doing something with the data? So these are the places where we saw humans, analysts in Excel, typically were playing a big role in spite of all the data infrastructure we sold them. That is the reality of what they were dealing with. And so we said, okay, isn't automation and RPA supposed to help with all of that? And we uncovered that essentially traditional RPA showed people the art of the possible, like what you could automate, but they couldn't really because they needed more flexibility than what was possible. So we said, what is the underlying unlock with LLMs that I think is amazing is language is programmable, which means that now you can say, in a way, knowledge work, which is all human language centric, is now programmable. So this was 2 years ago, and we needed to convince investors and everybody else why we were not working on chatbots and RAG. And we said, no, it's really this sort of, we were looking for this word, and we said, okay, agency is a really nice way for us to think about what it is that people have that lets them go from insights to outcomes. And so we said an agent-oriented system is going to be likely something that is going to be very helpful. And fast forward to today, that's kind of how Sema4 got together. It's all about the meaning of work, i.e. semantics, and then just doing the work in an agentic way. So that's a little bit about myself and my background. You asked about what did I go to school in? It's actually material science. So I spent a lot of time in just core engineering before computer science, and probably 30 years of data along the way. And now we're all in the agentic space, aren't we?
Yeah. And let me ask, so Sema4, you say it's not just chatbots and RAG. Does it also do chatbots and RAG?
So agents have conversations. I think the conversational mode is one of the nice flexible things. You don't have to build everything in a UI with 3 levels of top downs. So yes, Sema4 is a conversational agent system, but it's also a way for us to create unattended pieces of work. So you might go like, oh, I got a new email. The email has an attachment. The attachment has, let's say, a wire transfer inbound request. Our agents can listen to an email inbox, pick up the work, do the work. And if there is nothing more to be done, there's no conversational interaction there. But if they get stuck, like, oh, this, I don't know to whose account this should be credited to, then our agents have to interact with humans. So that's where that conversational piece comes in. And the piece about RAG is something that we believe that for the kinds of agents that we are building and we want to build for our customers, accuracy is going to be so important. And we like to say our agents are really good at following plans and asking questions. I think LLMs are suspect at answering questions. And so this is where, instead of RAG, where we give the LLM the 80% answer and hope that it picks out and generates and augments like the right accurate answer, we do that in a semantic layer that's outside of the agent. So then there's always transparency. You know what was the question, you know what was the answer. And this brings your entire enterprise's context, which none of these LLMs have been trained on, and you don't want them being trained on that kind of information. That's kind of where our agents have a role to play.
Okay, so you don't use RAG, but you use the semantic layer. Is that right?
Exactly.
And how does an enterprise? Well, let's back up. So
yeah,
it's a platform. It's a no-code platform. People are interacting, or users are interacting with it through natural language, text, I presume. When you ask it to build an agent that will read your emails and respond to certain kinds of emails with certain kinds of answers, is in the background, are there sort of pre-built modules that then the system is pulling together, or is it coding up a new agent each time?
Yeah. And fascinating set of questions, right? Because there's so many ways to think about agents, and I don't think any of them are wrong, right? It's just different. So for the kinds of work we're talking about here, look, I think if you step back a little macro, I think there's a tremendous variety of the kinds of things you could do in an agentic way. What we are focusing on is the actual core business function of that company. So let's say you're a bank and you're doing retail banking. So this is how do you interact with your customer. Let's say you're a manufacturing company and it's the operational shop floor activity, right? Let's say you're a multinational bakery. It's how do you do inventory placement and procurement, right? So it's the core business functions. The people who know how to specify this work, they live in the line of business. They don't live in IT. We like to think that they live in tech, but they don't. The actual work specification lives on the business side of the house. So for us, that starts off with the person who knows the process, sitting down with our system. We call this thing a runbook, where they explain what they're going to do. This is much more than a prompt. This is not, we don't want to turn your inventory specialist into a prompt engineer. That movie is not going to go so great, in my opinion. Right? Instead, what we want them to focus on is, how do they tell a new person in their team to do the work? What does best practice look like? We want to make sure that we capture the intent of the work, not the steps of the work, because then there's some flexibility in the steps that we could come up with later.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you define your agent upfront for your business process. Somebody vets it, both on the business side and on IT. As you're asking about like pre-built modules and so on, look, for these agents to work, you need to specify the work, which is English. And then the second piece is your enterprise data, that somebody working with folks who know the data models, who know what the right repositories are in your company, you bring them together. And then the third piece is being able to automate and take actions in downstream systems. You can think of this in today's vernacular like an MCP architecture for actually taking outcomes. So in our world, we want the business user to create this agent upfront through these three mechanisms. And after that agent just does the work on a daily basis. So a big part of what we're talking about is work that has a spec to it. So next year, let's say you're doing a 401k rollover with this agent. Creativity is the last thing you want from this agent. You want to be able to tell the auditor next year, oh, this is what happened. Here is what our runbook was. Here's what our SOP was. Here is the data elements that were used. This was the customer. This is how we kind of got here. So we help them build agents that are extremely reliable and accurate at what they do.
Yeah, and then the question about what's happening under the hood. Are you or do you have a coding model that's coding up agents, or do you have modules that have been built and tested that you're putting together?
So yeah, it's the nuance here is that we rely on the reasoning models for language understanding. So
Yeah.
whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Anthropic Claude, right? So we stay with the mainstream models for reasoning because I believe that those are the best at kind of what they do. Excuse me one moment, I'm losing my voice.
Sure.
Okay, let's give this another shot. So yeah, I think that for reasoning, we rely on the reasoning models in particular. Then when it comes to the semantic layer, this is where we help customers build together really interesting data models that can span all the different modalities. What I mean by that is you might have some data sitting in Snowflake. You might have some data sitting in MongoDB. This, almost every customer has this. One's an operational store, the other's an analytics store. How do you ask questions across them? In what language do you ask these questions? How do you get answers back? This is the layer when you're talking about deep integration. For us, this has to do with the meaning of data and the meaning of document. So these are the two areas that we specialize in. And then you can have integrations to existing systems, or most of our customers would have customized. No two customers run SAP in quite the same way.
Right.
So if you're going to go talk to SAP at the end of the day, there's an MCP server that you have to construct. So we have an SDK and a way for people to define these. And then you put all these three things together and you get yourself an agent that can reason, is knowledgeable about your data, and then can do things on your behalf. So that's kind of how you get that.
Yeah. And the semantic layer, that's pulling together data from different sources and rationalizing it, or making it, does it build an ontology? I mean, what does that semantic layer do, and how does it do it?
Yeah, so the key here is that we, especially coming from the data world, we said, here's what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is take all of your data and build something else from it, like a knowledge graph or another copy of the data. Because typically, you used to have 2 data stores and now you have 3. People will always tell you the third one's better, but it doesn't matter. Now you have 3 problems that you're going to have to go think about from a data management standpoint. So our layer is all about understanding the metadata, not the data itself. So then this lets us come up with ways to think about entities that should be related to each other, entities that are different from each other. There are like rich, complex relationships between them. Like, here's a customer, this is where they live, this is their shopping cart. These are all semantically addressable things that our layer can train only on the metadata and then come up with a language in which the LLM can ask natural language questions. So now when the agent's going through, it's going to say, oh, I reached this place in the workflow. This customer is trying to do a return. I need to understand their purchase history for the last 12 months. So then we say, oh, we have this question. We know how to reason about that. And it's going to go hit Snowflake. And then here's the 20 items that they've bought. And we are able to do all the simple things like access checks and the table stakes things that you need to do to make sure that this agent has access to the right, most current information. That we can do this without making another copy of the data. That's the trick. Okay. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of sort of how this layer works.
Yeah. And how scalable are these agents, and how many agents can you build and run? Are they running on Sema4's platform, or then do you export them and can put them on whatever host them wherever you might
Yeah,
host your stuff.
as you're connecting the dots, right? If we need line of sight to the customer's data, to the customer's backend systems, we're talking about, like, for us, the customers we're going to address with the solution. So these are large Fortune 2000, but mostly like in the upper end of that is kind of where we're concentrated right now. And they tend to have a lot of concerns around regulatory risk, exposure, line of sight, data exfiltration controls, things of that nature. They care about like the security, risk, and compliance profile of
Mm-hmm.
these agents. So for all these reasons, our agents run inside the customer's account and
I
their
see.
environment, right? So that gives them, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we announced recently Team Edition, which is a way to run our agents inside of Snowflake. So if you're
I
a
see.
Snowflake customer, you can run our agents without even leaving the Snowflake account that you're in, let alone the rest of the enterprise infrastructure deployment that you have. So that gives them the control and the oversight to make sure that at all times they understand what the agents are doing and how they are functioning.
I see. And the agents that are being built on Sema4, presumably you can build a series of agents that all talk to each other or work together.
Correct.
And how large can that system get?
Yeah. So there's today, and where do customers want to go with this, right? So I think that the agent marketplace has kind of exploded in terms of the number of approaches that people are trying and the amount of information that's out there. So I like to say that the market is over informative, in that there's a lot of information out there but under deployed. That's the reality of where we are, right? Is that I think it's early innings for agents in spite of all the hype, and that's the most scary, right? Like, how much more information could you have about agents out here? But if you think of the number of agents that customers have deployed today, where they want to go with this though is, it doesn't matter what scale of the organization, they know they will have more agents in the future than they have today. It's
Yeah.
kind of like data, right? We saw the same movie with data where they knew that they're going to have more data, lots more data 5 years from now than today. So I think we're in that phase. So where your question, I think, is really important about the architecture, because this is, if you were trying to solve one problem in the enterprise and you needed a solution, one agent to go solve that problem, you would operate in a particular way. I think most customers are setting up for a world where they have 20 agents this year. If this goes really well, 150 agents next year, and who knows, probably 2000 agents the year after. So I think this is where in the medium term, being able to manage a fleet of agents is going to be, we believe, a very important attribute. And that's kind of what we are designing and building for. We'll grow with the scale of adoption, right? I think that's the best way to approach these, because then you're meeting the customer just a little bit ahead of where they want to be, but you're not like overbuilding for. There are people who think there'll be 1 trillion agents and they're building for that today. I think the market has a little bit more maturity to go
Yeah.
through. We kind of go get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning, they're doing things like invoice reconciliation
Right.
or sort of email inbox management, things like that.
Yeah, they start with like processes that they have today. See, if you think of what I'm describing to you, this kind of an agent this is the IP of your company. If you
Right.
think about it, if somebody, like, if you are in the you know uh, power generation business, and if somebody else created an agent that understood how to run the purchasing function for your business, I have bad news for you. You've just been disintermediated, right? So companies understand that they want to go after the processes that make them who they are, but they don't want to do that on day zero, right? So because these also tend to be, for good reasons, really complex. They'll have to talk to lots of different parts of their company, and so they start off with the building blocks, and then they work their way up in complexity. But that's kind of where they're going, is to say, how do we take our core IP and express that with AI so that it's understood, so then we can optimize it. We can figure out how we are going to go merge a couple functions to go do something better. You really understand where the bottlenecks in your process are. We've never had that kind of a transparency about core business functions. That's the promise, I think, of kind of where we're going with this agentic stuff.
Yeah. I asked before we started recording, um, there are so many agent building platforms suddenly, just in the last 3 months or so. How does an enterprise decide which one is right for them? That's one question. The other question is, how do you guys stand out from the pack?
Yeah.
Or is the market so massive, as you said, it's very early days? There are a lot of companies out there, and everyone is looking at the space, that there'll be a piece of the pie for everybody.
Yeah, I think this is an important question for customers too, as they're trying to figure out how do we
Yeah.
make sense of all this noise, right? Look, I think that there is to me, there's almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of agents with their needs and wants, right? Is that the good news, I think, is that this way of building business applications, I just think of an agent as the next massive iteration of an application.
Yeah.
Just like you wouldn't be surprised if you came to know that there were several million applications deployed today. Of course there are. That's just a basic building block. I think with AI, people have been trying to figure out how to monetize, how to apply AI, right? And I think that AI is more than a knowledge base. AI is more than search. AI is more than generation, right? AI is more than predict. There's so many elements to it. I think agents are the manifestation of an AI application, which is kind of why I think there's so many of them. So then if you think of we see that, overall there's three broad ways that I see the market today. So one is there are tasks which are inherently like developer automation centric. Like, oh, you have a problem, let me fire up my Python editor. If that's your instinct, I think then you go to like a LangChain or a Crew AI or a Haystack or AutoGen or Semantic kernel or any one of these open source agent OS frameworks to go construct the agent. This is typically a developer centric, developer led motion. Sure, they have prompts, but the prompts are like sprinkled through like little pieces of English sprinkled
Yeah.
through this Python code that you're looking through. So we are not one of those. But I think that lends itself to a lot of the first layer of automation. This is, think of this as, oh, I need to download a file and do something with this file and upload it somewhere else. Just the actions where what you're trying to do is just connect together pieces of infrastructure and get to an outcome. But there's no best practice. There's no continuous learning or refinement that's expected of this kind of agent. So I think this is where the DIY frameworks, there's a massive presence there. And then there are others who are building agents that they will do the work for you, right? Like, you might say like there are customer service agents, or if you just drive by 101 into the city, you'll see billboard after billboard about here's an agent that does something for you out of the box. But the key with all of those is they're saying your work my way, because it's really, and many times I think that's appropriate if the work is sort of commodity, outsourceable, not differentiated. Why do you want to spend the time to to learn how to do that better, right? So that's what these are. I call these like purpose-built agents, and I think that there's a massive market for them. We're not one of those either. The way we see this agentic workplace is to say it starts with building for the business user. Like, what persona are you building for? What problem are you solving? That's kind of how I think we should think about. It doesn't matter what XYZ model they use, or what is their integration philosophy, but it's for the customer. They want to know what problem are you solving, and then who in my company do I need to bring to take advantage of your solution. So if you think of it that way, the problem we are solving for is squarely in the domain of the business user. So we're saying now our agents are going to, over time, help you describe the work that you do in natural language. We understand the work, and that's a very squishy and bold statement that I think over time is going to get better and better, so that we can get to improving the work. So then if you think of systems that can do that, there are very few of these today. But I think this is where we are going with agents in the enterprise. I think that it's also, this is a new and flexible way to connect all the layers in the stack. So everybody who used to sell an API or a product now also has agents, whether it be at the data layer, at the infrastructure layer, at the, every application is going to have agents. I view these as ecosystem agents. Like, let's say you did something with Salesforce yesterday. Today, you can do something with Salesforce in an agentic way. Let's say you talk to Zendesk to manage your customer. Today, you can do that with an agent. But that doesn't change what Salesforce or Zendesk is. It just means you have an agentic way to do that, right? And so this is, again, I encourage customers, please don't build agentic capabilities at that layer, because the vendors are going to do that over time. That's literally not your problem, right? They will solve it, and then you're going to catch up to it. So I think that hopefully that gives you a sense of sort of the landscape, the way I see it. And we are focused on the business user. Think of it as that's the North Star.
And as an enterprise gets more and more agents into their processes and workflows, there's a management problem. Do Sema4 have an agent management or orchestration layer, a super agent that watches all the other agents?
Yeah, I think the short answer is that there is a single pane of glass. Where both human operators and agents can supervise and manage agents. It's very interesting when we started deploying these agents. When you deploy an agent to production, every agent has a supervisor, a human. It's like an email ID or a group. And now they get to have some more rights to see what the agent is doing. So you can come in and say, like, oh, you did these 10 things and you got 8 of them right. And this is what you got wrong. And I'm going to make this change. And I'm going to now create a new version of this agent, and I'm going to watch how that operates, right? So that, we call this person like a process architect. I think this is like a new job role where this is a person who really understands the process, and the agent is the workforce that they have to delegate tasks to get what they're going to do done. So that's the model that we have, is like a single pane of glass for the basic stuff. And then every agent has a supervisor, every group of agents has a supervisor, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah. And what did you call that person? A process
architect?
Architect. Yeah. And that's the business
exactly
person with the business knowledge.
Correct. And that's where most of the learning has been for us. I thought it would be on the technology side, but these folks have never had the chance to make small, simple changes to what they do ever. Right? Because usually it'd be like, oh, I need to go get a new version of the software from a vendor, etc. Here, how do they make a change to the agent? They go change the runbook. So what we are seeing is 90% of the changes to our agents in production, they have nothing to do with data. They have nothing to do with automation. It's how you do the work. Because this is what people do. Like, you don't do the same task in the same way twice, right? Regardless of the complexity of the task, there's always some feedback, learning, things you're thinking about and optimizing. We're seeing the same in the runbooks. So now these process architects can make small changes, and then sometimes they're intimidated that, oh, the change I'm going to make is going to be in production. So they are part of a CI/CD pipeline, though they sit on the business side of the house. Right? So I think this is where being able to do better things faster, that's the promise of how you think about it in an agentic way.
Yeah. And which industries are you most focused on? Everyone seems to be going after financial services and healthcare.
Well, simple, right? Follow the money, and that's kind of where a lot of the money is spent on data analysis. These are also the industries which, again, going back to sort of my background, we saw that financial services, healthcare, and telco, these were all sort of the big investors in data infrastructure. So I think they have some of the processes in place. They understand what agents to build. This is the one question I got for the customers. I tell them, I cannot help you with one thing, which is, if you don't know the agents that you need to build, we're going to take a long time to figure that out together. So I think these industries, because of their data maturity, they're in a good place to go do that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and then how do you charge for this? Is this subscription by usage or by seat?
Yeah, this is it's early enough in the cycle that I think the honest answer for us is it depends.
Mhm.
Is that we know that people are very comfortable with consumption based models, but in this case, since they don't know how many zeros they're going to add for the number of agents that they're going to create in years 2 and 3. So this again, we took a story from our data playbook. Was, what we did there was we said in the early days we had a very sophisticated strategy for telling the customer how to think about us from an economic standpoint. We said, Teradata, it charges you X dollars per gigabyte per year. We'll charge you 1/20th of that price. At that point, I didn't have to tell you anything more esoteric about how the software worked, because then the
Yeah.
customer knows that, oh, we can store 20 times as much data and not break the bank, right? So I think that we are at a similar moment here where our focus this year is adoption, adoption, adoption. So we want to make sure that there's no friction barrier to people consuming before they understand how they are going to actually deploy this technology together. So typically, if it's a large enterprise, there's an idea of, let's make sure you have some skin in the game. So there's like a platform fee, and then they can build a set of agents, and that set can be very large based on the size of the organization that we are dealing with. But I expect over time, this will go to consumption-based pricing. I don't think it will be outcomes, because for the kinds of outcomes I'm talking about here, it's hard for me on the
Yeah,
outside
sure.
to know what it's worth to somebody on the inside to like book a ticket or do XYZ function. So I think it will be consumption in the medium term. But right now, I think it's about make sure that your monetization choices are not an inhibitor to experimentation, because I think that's what they really need to do. Is they need to understand for themselves how they can deploy this technology before they can decide how much they're going to pay for it.
Yeah. And we talked about how you differentiate yourselves, but the other side of that question is with the proliferation of agent building platforms.
Yeah.
How do you see the market developing? I mean, I was saying, is the market so big and we're so early days that there's plenty of runway for all these companies in their various directions or verticals, or do you see us reaching a point soon where there's going to be a shakeout? That's one question, and the other is because, as you were saying, companies don't know which platform to choose. But now with MCP and A2A and these different protocols, if they commit to, say, Sema4.ai, and then down the road there's another vendor that they want to work with, can you then? They're not locked in, right? Can they connect to other systems, or is it fungible in that way?
Oh, there's multiple good questions in there, right? Yeah. Look, I think that I still think this is early innings. So it seems like there's no. I hope we don't converge around any one solution. Of course, everybody, if it was Semaphore, maybe I'd be saying something different. I don't think so, because I feel that our understanding of knowledge work is not where it needs to be at the macro level, because people are so creative at how they do their job.
Yeah.
And for us, it's hubris for us to think that we got this all figured out because XYZ at this point in time. So I feel like it's early innings in a genuine, like intellectual curiosity kind of way. So I think that it's too soon if the market were to converge too soon, I think we'll just lock out good ideas. And that's never a good way to go make progress, right? I also think that it's not that there'll be hundreds, but I think that the data and analytics space has some clues about how this might work. That there will be, I think that for a long time, there were multiple winners in the space. But then over time, people realize that, okay, as your practices sort of become more straightforward, and I think over time you can converge. But for the longest time, there were probably a dozen analytic vendors. So I think similarly for the enterprise, there's going to be a number of different ways to do agents in the short term, at least. Bad news for you, the noise is not going to subside, I think, in the next 18, 24 months, we're still going to see a lot of innovative approaches. Because the one nice thing is, everyone that I told you in this spectrum of different kinds of agents, we're not building agents in the same way. I think that's a good thing, because that's kind of how you find out what works and what doesn't work and which parts need to be combined, right? So that's sort of my view on like the medium term take on this. Is there's going to continue to be alternative choices in the industry of how we go tackle in different use cases. And as we get more understanding about which ones are better candidates for an agentic approach, then I think you'll start to see some convergence or alignment there.
Yeah. I also asked you before we started recording whether there is developing a sort of cottage industry of consultants that are deeply familiar with Sema4, deeply familiar with, I don't know, Bedrock at Amazon, deeply familiar with Boomi, and then can because you're asking this process architect, as you call them, in each company or multiple people to get trained and understand how to use Sema4. And as intuitive or no code as it might be, that takes time. And the reason I ask is I was at AWS at one of their conferences, and they were saying, I think it was Bedrock, or no, it was another product. This is before the agent craze, but they were saying that there are people that are going to their training programs, getting familiar with the ecosystem around Bedrock and SageMaker and all of these. And then they are going out and acting as consultants for corporations that want to implement this stuff. Because, Amazon doesn't necessarily have the personnel available to do that. I mean, you mentioned consulting businesses sort of growing out of existing model producers, but do you see that developing?
I think that this is again, it's early enough that in some cases, the customer wants to know what is the best practice. Where do I start? How do I do what I'm doing? But I think the other interesting side of the trade is product companies like ourselves really want to know how they are building what they are building, right? Because this business user is not an easy persona to solve for. And I think traditionally we have told them this is how it's going to work and hope that we got it right. Or we just have people living there like consultants doing the whole thing for them, and that whole BPM like saga. I don't think businesses are thrilled about that. They don't want somebody to come in and build something that they don't understand. So I think that, but there is a lot of appetite for this bi-directional value exchange where we can share with them, like, this is how you write a runbook. A lot of questions we get asked are the basic, like, is this a good agentic use case? And it's not always what's it worth to you. It's got to be a little bit more than that. It's got to be, what are the elements that make up an agentic use case? That's what they're asking us, right? And that's a product model question. And these models are evolving so fast that I think you need that channel in. And from them, I think that there is a notion that this whole flywheel has gotten so much faster. If we have to have build and ship cycles that are 6 weeks long, there isn't enough time for us to say like, oh, we have a consulting part of our company, and then we have product management, and then we have engineering, and information is going to go bounce around through that way. So I think it's continuous everything. So I think that's kind of where the consulting relationships that could really work are where the customer gets value from us, and then we get value in learning with the customer. But probably they're not looking to hire people. They need to have solutions that they can build and extend and maintain at the end of the day. And how do you do that in the context of a product sale? I think that's sort of the business innovation that that kind of has to happen to make this model work.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, I mean, SaaS, the whole premise is that, SaaS companies can scale because they don't have to have someone in holding the hand of the
Exactly.
user. But so this exchange you talk about, how are you learning from the customer without having Sema4 employee directly engaged with the customer on what they're building, or is that what you're doing?
I think that this is a deep relationship with a few strategic set of customers. I don't know how this model scales, to be honest with you. As you get to larger numbers of customers, this model also has to scale, right?
Right.
At the life cycle, the industry and where we are at, we work very closely with, we call them design partners. So for these customers, right, there's a relationship there where we are very transparent with our roadmap, with things we are building or we're not building. We say, like, this is not agentic. There's nothing new here for you to exploit at this point in time for this use case. So you're better off not doing this use case at this point. They value that. So it's a very high touch, frequent relationship. There's a mix of strategic and execution in it, right? And so it's a good question as to how do you make this model scale. We know that certain parts of this have to become self-service, to your point. Like, the reason we picked Snowflake was we said, like, look, for Sema4, this is not a complicated thesis. How do we scale? By building better agents faster and getting them deployed in production faster. If you could do these two things, you scale. So we focused on the second half of that, which was how do you get them into production faster? And we said, what if you did not have to have IT involved in any step of that value chain? So that's where the Snowflake team edition thing comes in, where we said we can leverage the SaaS governance controls that they already have in place. They've gone through and they spent a year and a half proving out that Snowflake is good enough for their security and compliance story. Now they can run their agents there without having to look at that question again. So that, I think there are parts which should not be consultative, in my opinion, so that you don't, like, forget the good lessons that you learned from the past. And then the other part is, like, the agents you build and how are they accurate, where there's, like, collective learning to be had. That's the piece that we want to make sure.
Yeah. And I see you're early in this whole agent adoption, and the more you engage with customers, the more you learn about what customers need, and then eventually you can make it more self-serve and scale. How is Sema4 useful for small and medium-sized enterprises or even individuals, or is it really geared toward very large multinationals?
So for us, we started there with the large multinational. And then funny thing happened along the way was we realized that there's another constituency for whom agents are very appropriate, especially as the agent space has exploded, which is domain expert. They could be SIs or they could be ISV software vendors who now need to build agents that they know much more about the domain. The one thing I tell the customer is, if you have a purchasing problem, I'm the last guy you want in that room because I know nothing about that domain, right? But if there is a company that focused on, let us say, purchasing for apparel for mid-market, and now they're going to go build an agentic solution, we work with them. We got the right tools and capabilities. That's how I see us going after other segments, is that these are already existing customers of theirs, or they know how to appropriately scale to that part of the ecosystem. And because I think that in that segment, they need instant value. Like, those agents have to do something for them out of the box on day zero, which happens through the partner for us.
Right. I see. And so, it's an exciting time. Where do you see this going? How quickly are you guys growing? In 2 years, are we going to be living in a very different economy?
I think that at least for agents will be in our vernacular. in 2 years for sure.
Yeah.
Right? As in, I use an agent to do X today. It's when you say I used a travel agent, you mean a human.
Yeah.
I think in the future, when you say I use travel agent, you will be like, yeah, I think it's a human or an agent, right?
Yeah.
So I think that broad sort of consumer adoption of agents, I think will actually happen more transparently quicker in that time period for sure, which is kind of nice, right? Then we can have personal agents and assistants roaming around and doing transactions on our behalf, or starting to do transactions on our behalf. I think that's the world that I see. If this goes well, we should be in that kind of a world, I think, 2 years from now. I think for Sema4 itself, look, for us, we said for this constituency of customer, we're not focused on cherry pick demos. We're focused on security and accuracy. This trust takes time to build. I don't care how fast your large language model comes out. Trust is something that it takes a long time to earn and easy to lose, right? So I think that because of that motion, I think for enterprises, they will adopt the technology at a good pace, but I don't think you're going to get to thousands of agents this year, regardless of what people are telling you.
Yeah. And that the idea that we'll all have personal agents, how far out do you think that is?
Oh, I think that's very approachable. It'll be like, how good are they, right? Like, do you have an intern, or do you actually have, a knowledgeable domain expert that you would rely on to go do your taxes? That is the question. But I think the model will not change. It'll just be that the agents get better, faster, smarter, cheaper over time. And I think we are well on that journey now.
Right. Okay. Is there anything I haven't touched on that you want listeners to hear?
No, I think this was a pretty broad brush conversation. I appreciate the questions, and yeah, this was good. Thank you.